Hey, you're watching FlyWire Update, where I'm going to talk about some things that just happened recently. We don't have the full story on, but we have some really important details, and it's a situation to watch. And also, we're going to update a previous story we covered just about 2 years ago. The first one is a PA30, a twin Comanche that crashed in Enid, Oklahoma, just a few days ago. And there was reportedly 3 people aboard. Small confusion on the FAA ACES page that listed the accident initially before it turns over to the NTSB, and they only have 2 people on board that, but the news reports are there was a family of 3 aboard. They were on a fuel stop. They'd gone to South Texas and down in the valley, and they were there for about 3 days, and then on Thursday the 17th of March they took off from the valley and went to Mineral Wells and refueled at Mineral Wells. They're about an hour and a half-ish, and then they took off for home base, which apparently is in Nebraska. And let's see, along the way, the weather at the crash, near the crash site, which is actually 20 miles away, so it's not super reliable, but they were reporting winds from the south, 10 miles visibility, 5,000 scattered, 7,000 scattered, 9,000 overcast. But witnesses in the area reported rain, some of it heavy. The accident aircraft had been cruising at 9,000 feet and then they climbed to over 16,000 feet. So one would think that hypoxia might be a factor there, but they'd only there for 15 minutes. So that's within the FAA allowance of 30 minutes over 12.5. If you're there over 12,500 feet for more than 30 minutes, you need to be on oxygen. So they were only there for 15 minutes before they lost control. It's probably not the factor, but it is possible that hypoxia was some part of the poor decision making. It might have impaired judgment a little bit. That's always a possibility. Depends on the person. But witnesses, as I said, did report rain in the area, and the airplane was seen to be severely out of control coming through the clouds. ADSB, when I looked at the various different sources for the ADSB on this, the ADSB pegged the final hit at a decent rate of 30,000 feet per minute. That makes the decent rate about 340 miles per hour. And that's definitely a loss of control in flight. Like I said, the prelim is not out, but I think we have a reason for the aircraft climb. They were trying to outclimb weather. I'll show you that picture right here. This is part of the climb, and they crested the weather, and then on the other side, they're around 16,000 feet, and then altitude and heading became erratic, as you can see from the flight path. And it's hard to feature why it became erratic. I did a little bit of digging, and I found out the pilot himself was a current private pilot with an airplane, single and multi-engine land. This is a multi-engine airplane, but he was not instrument rated, and he was trying to top the weather, and in all likelihood flew into the clouds. And the FAA and the NTSB have done tests before, and non-instrument rated pilots generally can maintain straight and level for about 43 seconds on average. Flying into the weather. So that was not a good plan. It's an aeronautical decision-making aspect of this. The other one I wanted to talk about was one we did about 2 years ago. It's about the B36TC that crashed in Corona, California on takeoff, 36 Tango Tango. They had landed to refuel there at Corona, then they took off opposite direction from the wind, and they had a 5-knot tailwind on a 3,200-foot runway, and they took on board 78 gallons of gas. Okay, normally you might think that, okay, that's you know, it was almost empty for a Bonanza. Generally they're 80 gallons, but this is a B36TC at 102 gallons usable capacity. So the odds are, I think, that it was 78 gallons to full. And that's what they took off with, was full. The FAA's final report doesn't agree with that. I don't know what they based that on. They couldn't determine which pilot was actually flying. Both the left seater was apparently a friend of the owner. The owner pilot was in the right seat. This other fellow was in the left seat, and he had about 3.7 hours in the airplane and flown it. And according to witnesses at the airport at the time, the nose of the aircraft raised off the runway about halfway down, and then it settled back down on the ground. It looked like 2 more attempts were made to fly, and it didn't. It departed the runway, and actually did get airborne for a little bit once it left the prepared surface, and then flew into the ground, and then hit that berm and flipped over and burned. But on-site examination of the wreckage showed that the elevator trim tabs were in the full down position, which means it was giving the airplane full nose-up trim. And of course, that's not correct. It's not the takeoff setting, and that would have made the airplane pretty hard to handle. It would have required a lot of force to fly that airplane. So let's see. The NTSB thinks, as they computed the gross weight, the maximum weight on the airplane that was loaded with, they believe it was about 100 pounds overweight. I'm not so sure about that, but maybe they're basing that on luggage, etc., that they found in the wreckage that they did not list. The probable cause and findings of the NTSB's investigation is the pilot's failure to abort the takeoff, which resulted in a collision with a fence at the end of the runway. Contributing to the accident was the airplane being at or over maximum gross takeoff weight and the inappropriate elevator trim setting. And that's pretty much what we got from the preliminary report for the original situation that came out right after the accident. I did another video, and this one with Dan Greider, where we actually tested the different profiles for takeoff with this airplane, and if they'd been trying to do full aft elevator, whether it was the trim that caused that or it was them holding aft elevator because it was an attempt at a short field takeoff. And what it ended up doing was adding about 70% to the takeoff roll, and there's just not enough time. So check the link out below, and you can see that video as well. The actual rotation speed when I did the weight and balance on this thing myself, and then looked at the and I'll post this so you can see it. It looks like the rotation would have been about 70 knots. So they did not reach that until they were already in the grass just before they hit the berm. They did not reach that on the runway. And I think a large part of that was due to the drag of the elevator full aft and the attempts to fly too early. That burned up a lot of energy, and it didn't happen. So that's the final report for 36 Tango Tango, something we knew pretty much just about 2 years ago, and not getting much fanfare. But I think the lesson learned out of this accident is you got to know your airplane. You got to be disciplined about your checklist. You have to have a trigger to decide that the airplane's not performing the way it should be, and you're not going to be able to fly, so you can abort safely on the prepared surface. I wouldn't plan on aborting in the dirt. That's the update on the final report. As others that we've covered on FlyWire come out, I'll give more updates. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on FlyWire.